Hello, everybody. I was a bit mad to volunteer for this, really. I just want you to know at the start, I have zero South Australian blood in my veins, but my husband could be a member of the Pioneer Association because he's got loads of South Australian ancestors. Now, I know this webinar is really directed at our distant members, not the ones who can come into the library, but of course, anybody can use these resources from home. So we'll just start. People in the room, but the people far away may not know, this is the building we are currently sitting in. It's the old Unley Institute. It's been the home of Genealogy SA since 1996. I've even put a little map there in case someone ever decides to visit. It holds a wealth of resources, as everybody who's here knows. Okay, it's really a tantalising thing. It's a pity about that pole in the middle of the picture, but can't get rid of it. Okay. This is the home page. This is the page you see when you sign on, and it's the starting place for your journey. When in these screenshots, I'm already logged in. I do suggest you log in more or less straight away, and then you can get to everything. Otherwise, at some point, you will have to log in. So this is where you begin, and this is the home page. Now, I'm going to start with the handouts. You can see there's a wealth of help guides available under handouts. They've been created by members to help all of you find things. These do get updated, and certainly more and more keep appearing. At the very top of this screen, you can see an orange, the end of it, bottom of an orange slide. That's a video which in a way is the precursor to this talk. It's Emily Richardson talking about what you can get in the library. And so we've kind of extended it so you can see what you can get when you're not in the library. Okay, now down the bottom, I've circled where that help guide is. Select to search the databases. It's an instruction manual. I get that loads of people won't read the instruction manual, but if you get stuck, that's where you go. This is the first page of that instruction manual. It has all the hints and tips about, how to use wildcards, how to narrow your search, how to expand your search and things like that. So if you're stuck, go here. It's bound to have the answer. It does also explain about the uses of hyphens, commas, any kind of punctuation, what it will do to your search. So keep your eye on that part of the database. It's funny talking to the computer and everybody here, I don't know who to put my attention on. The people out there in far north Queensland or you. It's a cool day here, everyone, by the way, who's not here in Adelaide. All right. Now, the photos in the background of this slide come from our photographic collection. So they're many of the things we actually have. This help guide, this breadcrumb, shows you what's in a birth, death or marriage certificate, because it changes over time. It's also what is in a certificate when is also in the handout section. So it's everywhere. And it's worth reading, especially if you're starting to look at births, deaths, marriages, because it's not as simple as you think it is. You can search it in the online database search, obviously, and you can view the actual microfiche here in the library. You can also order transcriptions for these items. Due to restrictions set by the registrar, we cannot copy or scan or photograph those microfiche records, but we can certainly transcribe them. This is the beginning of when you go into the online database search. This is the first top bit of the big page you see at the beginning. The Society, as I said, has these births, death, marriages records on microfiche, and we created the index. We don't have any certificates. We are gradually building a database of certificates that people have given to us, but they're not from the registrar and they weren't bought by us. You'll know from our newsletters and from the journal, we're always adding to this. We're just doing a bit of adding to this collection of births, deaths and marriages. So keep looking at what's going on. That wasn't me making singing noises. Here's an example of our newsletter where we said how we were getting new records, and then there were 211,000 more death records now available. So they've been added, and the members have been busy working away, getting them up ready for you. So they can go up to late 1989 now, though we cannot give you a record, up to that point of time. We've also added newspaper divorces, and we've also added Quaker records, and all that is in this newsletter. So keep your eye on the newsletters. It lets you know what's happening. It lets you think about what you haven't searched and what might be worth searching. So it's not all, you know, gloom and doom. Now, what we've got here is actually a search. The example here is the newspaper birth records. But remember that the newspaper birth records includes birthdays and birthday memoriams. So you don't just get people who are born in South Australia and somebody sticking their notice in the newspaper. You also get people putting in birthdays and birthday memoriams. So that might well include people who are not born here but have lived in South Australia. Okay, this is a screenshot taken from the newspaper birth records. And as I said, it includes many more things than just births. It had birthdays and birthday memoriams. The newspaper death registrations includes deaths, funerals, in memoriams, lest we forget, and return thanks. And the newspaper marriages includes matrimonial petitions, engagements, approaching marriages, and wedding anniversaries. And the good thing about these records is in most cases, they come up nearly to the present. They're always being worked on, though of course there are many less notices in the paper than there used to be. But this is a great plus because it comes after Trove ends in 1954. So you can get relatively recent people, which is useful if you're searching your own relative you don't know about or siblings and of the people you do know about. All right, now, here is the records I found. Now, I've stolen this search from David Ballinger, who's, I think, in the back room, so don't come out, David. Oh, he's up there. Sorry, David. I've stolen this search. This is a plagiarised search from David, and it's actually his surname. David's the chair of our research and development. He knows all about these databases. Anyway, I stole the search from him. I filched it. And you can see all the birth notices with Ballinger as the name I've searched. However, if you re-click on the top of the column where parents are, you can get it to sort in alphabetical order. So the first two down, circled, are Bruce and Elizabeth, and they have 2 children. But you'll notice a little bit further down, Elizabeth and Bruce also have children. So you have to be really careful when you search these things. If you're trying to clump people together, remember the names can be the other way around, and they can also be spelt wrongly. So don't take your first glance as all the siblings in a family. Just make sure you've done a bit more thinking about it, because there could be initials, and they could be reversed, they could have a different surname, they could have a nickname. So just be a little bit careful if you're trying to find the entire family this way. But I think that goes for any kind of database search. Now, I've gone to paper, everyone, so I've now got to turn my notes over. This is a little bit serious, isn't it? Right, the other thing I said in the marriages, there was also divorces, and I found this divorce record. You'll notice that on the left-hand side of the screen is the actual snap of what you found when you searched the name Rundle and you looked in the newspaper divorces, and you get Lancelot John Rundle, and his respondent's given name is Elaine Gwenda, but there's no co-respondent's surname. But if you expand that and go to view more details, you'll see that her maiden name is there, but it's not listed as the co-respondent surname. So it's sort of filed somewhere else in a sense. So you can find out far more about this record than appears on the first screen. And as members, you can always view more details. If you weren't a member, you'd have to ask somebody to do this lookup for you. Obviously, the notes tell you what's gone on. It's a decree nisi, it was uncontested, and she's gone to Balwyn in Victoria, leaving poor Lancelot John Rundle all on his own. It's a very sad state of affairs. Okay. I thought I'd do a bit of my own, well, my family, for a joke. This is from the South Australian Cemeteries part of the database, and it covers about 850 South Australian cemeteries. Now, my search was for Charles Hardy, who I knew was buried at Wallaroo. There are 2 records that are my Charles Hardy, a burial register and a memorial inscription. Now, I've been to the Wallaroo Cemetery, and the memorial inscription, that is the gravestone, has actually fallen over, and I imagine won't be around very long to be able to be read. So knowing that this is here and will be here forever is a great advantage. So gravestones that have long disappeared or that you find and can't read in a cemetery may well be here. So it's worth having a look. You also find out more information. In the burial register, I know who the ministers were who were presiding. That's the only extra information. But in the memorial inscription, I actually got a birth date, born on the 13th of June, 1821. So I knew I more or less knew his birth year from his marriage certificate, but I didn't have any idea of the actual date. So I got an actual date. Now, another piece of work that is going on by volunteers is to add images to these records. So watch this space. Soon you'll be able to see from afar those memorials. Now, a big piece of our database collection is the all other records, which is really a job lot of zillions of things. I kept searching for my Charles Hardy, and there he is. And I can see this is an example of the different places, different sorts of records that are in all other records. My Charles Hardy was awarded a job as a constable in Metropolitan Adelaide on the 22nd of March, 1853. And that was in the Government Gazette. And he becomes the gaoler at Her Majesty's Jail, Wallaroo. And he's on the electoral roll saying he's located there, as I said, as the governor, not as an inmate. So you can find where they've been as well. There are masses and masses of these sorts of information. So you need to keep your eyes sort of peeled. Now, the next one. My husband's surname is Betteridge. So I searched Alan. He's he's not South Australian, but he's got South Australian ancestors. Anyhow, so here we go. I find this. Now, I've actually been looking on and off at his family for a while, but I haven't looked for some time because I've been busy elsewhere. And suddenly I find that he's got his direct ancestors and clone ancestors are scattered all over this database. I put an arrow, as you can see on the screen, next to one bit, which is his great uncle, Arthur Allen Betteridge, who changed his name in 1951. And so did his children change their name in 1951. I've actually no idea. So the top record and the records either side of Arthur Allen at the lower part of that are name change records. I've yet to now track down the why part because they're actually found at a services department, which is really the land titles office, and they know nothing about the fact that they actually hold the hard copy of these name change records because they think they're only about land titles. So that's another story to tell, but it's not in state records, it's here. I noticed that his great-great-aunt Florence has signed the women's suffragette record. I see that his great-great-grandfather, I thought was a pharmacist, is registering to be a veterinary surgeon. And I see his great-great-uncle is also registering to be a pharmacist, but he's in Broken Hill, which you may or may not realise is actually in New South Wales, though I'm sure everybody here thinks that it's in South Australia. My husband thought his father was born in South Australia, which is what his father always said. I couldn't find him, but of course he was born in Broken Hill and didn't realise it wasn't part of South Australia when he was a child. He just assumed he was part of South Australia. I mean, there's another thing here that's a bit of a shock. If we keep rolling down, if we look up the top, the second record from the top, you'll notice that Alan Rupert Betteridge, my husband's grandfather, was convicted in 1931 of something, and that's in the Police Gazette. So I'd have to look at the Police Gazette to find out more details. That was a bit of a shock, really. You like to find out nice things about their registering to be a vet, but you're not so keen to find out they're convicted of things. If I scroll down this page further, which I haven't done, I can find Alan's father was also convicted of something in the Police Gazette, which I've yet to show him and I've yet to find out. And he's not really interested in family history, so this is sure to turn him completely off it. I don't think he wants to know these things. But you can find lots of things. It's just amazing where your ancestors appear in the official record. And it's those records our volunteers have been scanning and indexing. So that's where it all comes from. And it's always growing, this area. Right, well, I found some other intriguing records. I do have some Daniels in my husband's family, but these aren't them. But this was just to show you the enormous breadth of the records we've got. John Edward Daniel, seaman, is a pre-civil birth. And if we go to the record, it lists the names of the mother and father who are not John Edward Daniels, but have other forenames. So clearly, this is the record, I believe, this is the record for the baby who's not a seaman, but presumably the father is a seaman. So this is...
Just ask what is pre-civil?
It means that the registering with a registrar hadn't started yet. It doesn't start till 1842, so this is before that. So the one way to get those records, well, mostly the only way to get those records is church records. So you can get church baptisms, but you're lucky to find them, really, because they've got to be registered somewhere. And there's no newspapers to remember at this point, 1839. There's no newspapers. I mean, it might appear somewhere else, but it's not in the news. There are no newspapers. So this comes from various government records, actually, the source for this. And the next one down is even more interesting, because her record, this is a pre-civil death in June 1841. She's buried in the Coorong area, and she was murdered. She was a passenger on the Maria. So if she's yours, there's loads more digging to do. These records come from the Colonial Secretary's files, which are all in the state records. So you can find things which, in a way, both of these don't really help you much, though you do get John Edwards' parents, but you don't get a lot more about Kitty Argyle Daniel. And if you look at Trove, she's not there because there are no newspapers in South Australia, and it doesn't get recorded somewhere else in a newspaper, not that I could find. So it's like a little gateway, that the answer's not always in our databases, but our databases may well give you a clue to where else to go and look. So they're not the beginning and the end, but they're certainly a big chunk of the puzzle. I'm actually fascinated by what happened to poor old Kitty. It's a passenger on the Maria, obviously in the Coorong. Somebody knows what happened. All right, now, this is a bit more actual facts about the databases. When you go to this database page, this is sort of further down the page. It's birth, deaths, marriages at the top. It's newspapers, and then we go down through church records, cemetery records, church records, and so on. Now, over to the right is the Adobe Acrobat symbol, and that is actually a document about what's in the database. And I guess what's not in the database that you might think is, and it describes everything about it. So if you want to know what you're looking at, it's there. The dates are there, the number of records, and the last time it was updated are there. So that does help you get an idea of what's happening. You will notice over time that those numbers keep changing, getting bigger, because people keep doing more work and adding more things to these files. Now, when you look at find a record, it used to be the case that you could have a look up for members, which then gave you some more details, but that doesn't happen anymore because everything is there. When you find a record and you say view details, everything we've got is shown to members. So it's there, you've got it. If it isn't there, we don't really have more information. Sometimes the records are a bit thin, and that's because they might be from an old record, an old set of index card someone created, and we've just digitized it. So if you've got a complaint about it, my suggestion is volunteer to fix the record rather than complaining about it. But anyway, let's not go there. Now, just because you don't find it doesn't mean it isn't there. It's actually quite amazing how much you can find if you just slightly change the dates, if you change the first letter of their initials, if you spell them differently. It can be exhaustive, and just like any other database, you do have to have a bit of an understanding of what time period you're looking at, whether that could be them or not them. I mean, I end up with thousands of Bettridges that aren't mine. I'm always discounting because they don't fit in. We do get contacted about errors, and we want to be contacted about errors. So please tell us if you find an error in a database. It might be the error is in the original record, and it's not an error in the sense that we've transcribed it incorrectly. It might just actually be that somebody got it wrong in the very first place. We've actually had a few people come into the society who the births, deaths, marriages people think are men and they're women, and they have to prove they're women by finding a girls' school admission register of them to show that they were enrolled as a girl and they've been a girl for 80 years or 90 years. And before the registrar will believe them. They never undress for the registrar, I noticed. They never offer that. However, moving on. I just think remember to be persistent and keep looking. Now, if you get really, really, really stuck and you remember you can ask for a research request, you have to give as much information as you can and we'll try to help you out. Now, one of the databases we've got is the Irish-born South Australians. Now, this is a member-submitted database, and it's been undergoing quite a bit of work because it was a bit of a mess, if that's a technical term for it, but it was a bit of a mess. And so what we're doing is trying to clean up the duplicates and make it sort of neat. Now, the focus in this database data set is not so much the individual as the families. The idea is to collect every Irish-born person who was in South Australia in the 19th century, that is from the 1800s forward, and their next generation, who aren't themselves Irish-born but of Irish heritage. It is said that over a quarter of Australians have Irish heritage, so this is a little chunk of those very people. This is another set of records that's been filched from David's family, and he's searching for Patrick Hare, he says is how you pronounce it. I know, it sounds a bit weird to me too. Anyway, so we search for Patrick. We find a record for Patrick. So this is what the record looks like. At the top, you can see Patrick, and he's born in 1874 in South Australia, and he dies in 1935. At the bottom of this record, highlighted in red, which means it's a hot link and you can search further, is Patrick Sr., his father, and his mother, Mary Noonan. And you can't quite see it there, but it's also his spouse. Sorry about the slightly mangled record. That's because of the zoom thing in the way. That's why you can't see it. Okay. Anyway, so you can now link on it. So we can continue the search. We can find more of the family. Now, remember, it's a member-contributed database, so it might have flaws in it. Then again, it might have beautiful records in it. So it can't be, you know. Oops. I'm turning pages here, everyone who's on the Zoom. I've gone back to, actually, no, I've gone back to the low technology option. Now, the next record shows you, if you look at Patrick Sr.'s record, this is our Patrick's father, we can see Patrick Sr.'s father is Thomas, his mother is Mary, unknown. But the best thing about this is, and you can't see it because of the zoom thing in the way of my record, but at the very bottom of the record is a whole lot of highlighted siblings of Patrick. So now you can start to see the whole family. So if you're stuck on one bit of the family, often if you search a sibling, you can find out something about the family and you can make some assumptions about your family. So finding siblings is actually quite terrific. And the IBSA will let you do that. Now, back to my family. So this is an example from my own family, well, my husband's family, my children's family. As soon as the cards for the hospital admissions was digitised and loaded into the database, I continued my years and years long search to find out more about Charles Trower, my husband's 2 times great-grandfather. And there, lo and behold, immediately are 3 records. Charles Trower, by the way, is a very undocumented person in the world. I don't know what he did really, but he was very undocumented. I had never found a ship bringing him or a brother, Thomas Sharp Trower, who I presumed was his brother, to Australia anywhere. So this was an amazing find. Suddenly, I find out that he's been in hospital 3 times, and each of those hospital records show you the ship on which he arrived. This is, in 1891, they are still asking him which ship he arrived on. He came in 1853. So they still care about shipping records. So this is an amazing find for me. And it just shows, it would never have occurred to me to look in hospital records to find the ship, ever. Like, why would you do that? Why would you know that? Why did the hospital care? Who knows? Anyway, I find his religion and the ages, as you can see, make sense. As he gets older, he goes in and out, they get the ages more or less right. So it's quite fascinating. And there he is. He gets admitted, his age is about right. I can work out where he lives. I can work out where he came from, what he's doing. And he's been in South Australia in 1878 for 25 years. So I now know more or less which voyage of the Volvish there is. So this is from our hospital records. So you might not expect it. You know, I was expecting to find out some diseases or something, but it wasn't. No. So I then went back and worked out why hadn't I been able to find this before? Because I'd been looking. So I went back to the state records, which is the record on the left. And only about 30% of the South Australian shipping records survive. The rest you have to get from the newspapers. And all these codes down the side in that red ring on the left are newspapers, the register being the R. So this comes from the newspaper recording, this ship's arrived and these are the passengers. It's not actually an official state record. So there they are. Now, over time, that Trower-5 has been written as Trower-S. And I'm looking for Charles, remember. So I presumably just ignored it. But there it is. Now I know it's trower and he's there, and I know it's the fish, the bullfish, I can't say. And so I went to our own database, which is passenger arrivals, and there it is again, trower -5 Volvish, and they arrived on the 10th of February, 1853, just when one of Alan's relatives arrived and got to be a police constable, but he was in a different ship. Amazing. Anyway, so there they are. And these are the same, in a way, these are the same records. One is the state records version of it, and one is our version. I have to tell you, using our database is about a zillion times better than using the online state records search. It's almost, I don't know how people work out, if they haven't tried everything under the sun, to work out how they can even search passenger records. It's almost like they've got all this stuff, but they don't want you to find anything. Ours is lovely and straightforward and simple. It is the same record. It's from the same sources. So you can see the source of our records is the state records GRG 56/68/7. And over here, when I found it on their website, it's the same record set. But I would advise you to use our passenger search before you use theirs, because theirs is rubbish. I say as a taxpayer, rubbish. Anyway, so I still couldn't quite work out, why I hadn't been able to find them. So I went to Trove then. Now, this is an example of how our records are terrific, but they are often a pointer. They're not everything. And because Trove exists, you can go and then sort of confirm things or broaden things. So I now know who else came with them on that ship. You certainly couldn't use state record stuff to find this sort of thing out. And there they are, trower 5. And this is where state records got their records from. And now I know 5 trowers have arrived in 1853 on the Dutch ship, the Volvish. I had no idea there were 5 of them, not a clue. So now I've got to go do more work on the family history that's never done and find out who in the world are all these other trowers. Are mum and dad there? Are there more brothers and sisters? Are there children? I don't know. So because the records don't tell you that anyone's given names, I just know there's 5 people called trower, and there they are. So watch this space, really. There'll be another talk in years to come on the trowers of South Australia. Okay. Now, the other thing sometimes don't get very much. In this search, I've searched for Sharam, SHARAM, and I only found 5 results in the first look: a birth registration and a marriage registration. Well, the marriage is there, and then they have a baby. That's so they really don't learn a lot more except there's a baby. But if we scoot down the thing, there are 2 other records. They are electoral roll records, which is sort of useful. You know where people are at what time. But it's the last one, which I can't quite see. 1 result in the Biographical Index of South Australians. This was amazing. In the record set, remember this is user contributed, so it's not a primary source, but it certainly will point you to primary sources once you know some of this information. And there is John Thomas. He's born in 1849. That's the birth record we've got. And so he gets married, and that's what we've got. And there it is. They go to Victoria. So all of the other children are born in Victoria. So the Sharams were here just long enough to make a contact with Alan's family, but then they were nowhere. But they were if you dig deeper. So this Biographical Index of South Australia is a fabulous resort because somebody is in South Australia and then they go somewhere else and you can still find them and you can still track them. Clearly there's loads of work to do, but you've got the beginnings of it. This is not always 100% correct, and we do find errors in it because sometimes people have got the same name and they get mixed up, and anyone who searched Ancestry will know how bad it is on a giant database like that, but it still happens even in a smaller database. So you do have to actually always check everything here. You can't just take it as gospel, but it's a good starting point. At least I know to go look in Victoria, which I wouldn't have thought of before. I just thought they'd all, I don't know, faded into the wind. How do I know what happened to them? Now, the next bit of this talk is a database we have, which is, I think, sort of underutilised. It's this magnificent library everyone in the room is sitting in. And I think we need to do more to make it more useful to people at a distance, as well as people who can come in here and actually use it in person. This is the home page of the library, which gives you all this information I'm about to give you. I keep worrying about my left and right. On the right are pictures of new books. in the last 60 days, 250 new things have been added to the collection. So you can see it's growing quite rapidly, the collection. There are over, as you can see on the left, there are over 40,000 items, including 4,500 family histories. And there's an extensive collection of microfiche and microfilm covering the world. And there's loads of local history journals and magazines of which you can request articles if you know they're in there. So I think this is an important resource which we could use more of, particularly if you're doing a kind of family history where you want a bit of context, a bit of understanding of places, what's going on. On the home page, you can obviously do basic searches. You can search by word, by title, by author, all those things. You can do an advanced search and so on. But I'm just going to point to this other little button that says Other Searches, which can help you refine your searches. So you click on Other Searches, and you get up and you click on, and then you're choosing resource type, which is the Other Searches. I've chosen resource type, and then there's an alphabetic listing. And in this case, you can find electronic resources, but you can find photos, you can find South Australian works, you can find atlases, you can use those letters that are there on the screen to look underneath one, and it'll limit what you're looking at to those categories. There aren't that many electronic resources at this stage, but they are slowly growing. We have electronic resources in the library on the reading computers, but we don't have permission to let that be promulgated outside the building. And so we have full text things that are on the reading computers up the back of the room at the library. And maybe one day we'll get permission to put them up out to the bigger world. They include more admission record type stuff than this. But this is a start. So if you're looking for things, go look here. Now, the other huge collection we've got, which you can use from home and you can use online, are photographs. Now, there are 2 help guides on photographs, both appearing on the front page of the library catalogue and in the handouts. And they are how to search the photographic collection and the photographic collection predefined lists. So there's loads of ways of looking for photographs. Now, I chose the name Smith to search because I figured there would be definitely something with Smith in it. And I wasn't wrong. Because there are 500 plus. When you do a search on the library catalogue, if there's more than 500, it only gives you the first 500. So you do have to refine. If you're really serious about looking at something, you would have to refine that search because you can't possibly look through 500 easily. Anyway, I've chosen photographic material types. And so up come all the Smith photos. And in this case, I chose Catherine Elizabeth Softly and Charles Robert Smith. And there's a beautiful photo showing the indoor plants. Now, last month, Kira Lindsay, the history advocate for South Australia, gave a talk on writing history, and she was fascinating. And she actually takes the view that she had some photos that were of convicts from the period of her convict ancestors she was writing about. They were not photos of her convict ancestors, but they were of the time and stylistically would have been very similar to them. So she used the photo as a kind of an example. So you can assume they look like that, though it wasn't them. So it's possible if you're writing history, you could assume your ancestors looked like these 2 or had a wonderful collection of indoor plants like these 2, and you could put them in your book. Or else, if you seriously are related to Catherine Elizabeth Softly and Charles Robert Smith, you can use this photo. There are sometimes copyright restrictions on the use of photos, but not very often. So there you go. Obviously, photos will also give you, in this case, a photographer's name because it's a stage photographer. So it's really the photographer's collection of indoor plants. And also you can date the clothes and so on. Now, we do have in our photographic collection loads of records which say unknown baby, unknown couple, unknown man, unknown woman. And we would love it. Anytime you look at those photos and think, oh, that looks like Great Aunt Gertrude, let us know. We would be really thrilled. I've done that to the State Library because they had some photos that were very badly labelled, and I thought, how could they have even thought that in the first place? But not to worry. So if you're at a distance, this photographic collection may turn up something quite amazing that you didn't know about. Now, the other way to find relatives is to put in the family name while you search. Now, sometimes it's not much, sometimes it's not there, but sometimes it is. In this case, I searched the family Hobba, H-O-B-B-A, which is a Cornish name. And this book, The Southams of a Barunga, actually has all the family people you can see listed at the bottom and more, because I've obviously cut off the screen, and they're all there. It is possible, if you can't actually get into the library, to ask for a research request where people could look at that book, look in the index, find the Hobber family, or in this case, or the Peaches or whoever, and send you the bit that's in there about the family you're interested in. You'll also notice in this record, there's a little PDF download file. That we're putting this more and more in. This particular book was an entry in the T.T. Reid Family History Award in 1998. You'll know that's an award we give out to South Australian family histories. There's one given out every year. And gradually, we are actually scanning the contents pages of those books. So in this case, you could look at the contents page and you could see there's a chapter on the family you're interested in, and then you'd know you could request it. You are, by law, by copyright law, allowed to have a chapter of a book scanned for you for your personal research. So it wouldn't breach copyright law. I'm always looking more in this because things are always being added and records are always being improved. So if you looked 5 years ago and didn't find anything on your family, look again. You're almost certain to find more. Things are happening, things are growing. We've got lots of, keen volunteers working away. So don't stop there. Now, I know it's not as much fun as being in the library and borrowing the book, and maybe one day we'll be able to work out how to do that so books can be borrowed by more people. That's my pet beef, but no one else seems to be so enthusiastic as me. But anyway, that's where you can find other family history resources. Now, the thing I haven't mentioned is the forum. Along the top of the homepage at the end on the right, you'll see forum. This is where you can put in questions to other members and they can respond. I personally don't like the forum, which is why I'm not really pushing it. I think you can get poor information from people. I mean, obviously get friendly, helpful information too, but I just find it not that fantastic. But anyway, it's up to you. We are a member society with lots of different views, and so you can have your own, which can be different than mine, but it won't be right if it is, but you can have it just the same. Now, if you've signed on, and I have, see it says log out because I've obviously logged in. This is the kind of thing you'll see when you look under members, all the benefits you get and the member-only pages. So I suggest everybody explore those. This, for example, is the latest South Australian genealogist, which is available online as well as the copy that will have been sent to you. So you can look at it electronically. And there, for example, is our member newsletter for March, which is advertising our Mad March book sale, which was fabulously successful 2 weeks ago. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, week and a half. I'm lost. Now we've changed months. I can't cope really. We do have a few years of the South Australian genealogist online and accessible all the time, but we are working on actually getting the whole of the South Australian genealogist available. So watch this space. Once again, it's another example of we're improving all the time. I mean, technology is also catching up with all our good ideas, which is another thing. I suggest you all read your newsletters when they come out. They're worth reading. We do ask people that, for things then, but we also tell you what's getting updated, what's happening, where things are going. We're working very hard. Now, the other place you can look is services. I won't touch on the research part because that really is the research service where you ask for transcriptions, you ask for lookups, and you can ask questions. We do say if you're asking us a question, make sure you give us more information rather than less, because there are an awful lot of John Smiths out there. And no, just because you found him doesn't mean we know what he had for lunch on Sunday in 1873, but people do ask those sorts of questions, believe it or not. Everyone here would be knowing that. Okay, so the special interest groups are another place where you, the user, might get more out of it. You can zoom into the event calendar and you'll see when the special interest groups meetings are on and you can join. You don't have to formally join a special interest group. You can just come along for the ride, and you'll find you do get sucked in though. So be careful. Be very careful. It's like the disease of genealogy and family history research. You get sucked in very easily. There's the list of our groups. They meet monthly, except in the case of Scotland where they meet every second month. And they're usually a Zoom meeting, and you can Zoom in, just register, and in you go, just like you've Zoomed into this. Now, the other thing is once you're there, you can share with it, you can introduce yourself, you can meet other members, and also you could even find yourself volunteering to give a talk. If you're like me, you get volunteered even if you didn't mean it. So there you go. Now, Everything I've shown you today and everything you look at have been created by volunteers. That is, members of the society who do it for, except for our 12 life members, the other 4,500 so of us contribute financially, but through our membership subscription. And the society is only as effective as everybody who helps is. So I would like to think that you and me are benefiting from all those thousands and thousands of hours of skilled volunteering by people in the past. So I'm volunteering, I'm paying it forward by volunteering now. So I would hope that everybody out there in Zoom land is doing the same thing. For example, if you think you've done your family history, I'm always amazed when people say, oh, my dad has done my family history. I said, really? Done everything? You might like to help by volunteering and helping others do their family histories. You get out of SAGs what you put in, and here is the form you can register with. Okay. The end. Over to questions.
So, thank you so much, everyone. We will be doing the Q&A section now. We have a couple of questions online. If you have any questions in the room, stick your hand up. Let's get started. The question is, how do you contribute to the Irish-born South Australian database?
There's a form, an online form and a paper form you can fill in. You do need to do, it's a bit tricky. That's why I think the database isn't growing as fast as it might. But you basically fill in a series of forms. It's done in Family Tree Maker on the inside, but you can, on here, you can, it tells you somewhere. That we get to the, oh no. And online, if you go to the database, information about the Irish-born South Australians, it tells you there how to go about it, actually. But we're always wanting more people. I'm actually doing a piece of work myself on all the girls who came on the Earl Grey scheme, the 3 ships that came to South Australia, because clearly they all landed in South Australia and they clearly all came from Ireland. And so far, not one of them has been in the database of the, several hundred girls, nearly 1,000. So I'm busy doing that piece of work as well. So it's certainly ripe for more improvement. Any keen volunteers, welcome.
All right. Question from online, from Emma. She says, on the birth record, they're shown that there were just DW under parents. Are these initials or an abbreviation for something?
There'll be an abbreviation. And there is actually on that handout page, I have to apologise, I don't actually know all the abbreviations. On that handout page is actually a list of abbreviations. So if you look there, you'll see what it says. I don't know if anyone has an expert. No experts okay. At the back of the room volunteering. But anyway, it's there. And if not, I'll look it up anyway. And Gemma's got your contact details, so I'll get back to
you. If anyone has anything that they'd like me to follow up afterwards, you've all got my email address because I all emailed you this morning. So just flick me a reply with any questions, and I can help out.
A thing I do need to tell you about birth records is that obviously I volunteer in the library itself, so I can access the microfiche of birth, death, marriage records here, and I have done so. And the police constables whose example I showed you had 2 small children while they were still living in the parklands after they'd arrived, and one of them died. And I obviously used the index to find the date, and I went to the microfiche and found the record, but I couldn't read it because it's in handwriting. So I actually paid my, whatever it was, $13 for a transcription because I couldn't read it. And so the volunteers here, even though we're standing right next to them, the volunteers here, I paid my money and they transcribed it. So I've got a typed version of it because I simply couldn't read it. So that's a way if you're hopeless like me, even though you can get to the library, doesn't mean it all works for you necessarily. Why weren't they thinking of me in 1855 when they wrote that stuff out?
I have a note here. DW means deceased wife.
Oh, there
Thanks,
you are.
Emma. A question from Francis. Can SAGS members contribute photos of gravestones and copies of certificates to be added online?
Yes, they can. We'll have to get in touch with how, because I'm not 100% across the gravestone images, but they're certainly sending out little teams of people to look at gravestones and take photos. So
follow up with me on that one, Francis.
Yeah, but we'll definitely, David, we'll probably be able to tell them this afternoon, actually, the answer to that question. Yeah. But it is a very active project and there are teams out there taking photos. So if you've already got them, go for it.
Questions about where people can access the gazettes and the Colonial Secretary records?
Okay, now the government gazettes are available online through AUSTLI, AUSTLII. It's a joint project by the legal departments of all the states and all the university libraries in the country. And it was done decades ago, really, but as soon as online things happened. And the South Australian Government Gazette is there. There is an archive set on the South Australian Government site, but that only goes back to the 1990s. The ones from the beginning are on the Austlii site, and I suggest you go there, you find South Australian Gazettes, and you can get them. You do have to know which year and, you know, which month and so on. Otherwise, you've got to search way. They're basically weekly government gazettes at the beginning, and there is the most amazing information to be found in them. And lots of the lists of licenses and people like that have been done by volunteers, but the whole thing is online and can be searched at Austlii.
Austlii, how's that spelled?
Austlii.
Thank you.
I don't know, Austlii, I think it stands for Australian Legal Information something. I can't remember, but you'll find it. But if you look up South Australian Government Gazette, you might actually find the Austlii thing on Google, so that's where it is.
Questions from the room?
In regard to searching birth, deaths, marriages, outside of a year range, what could be the other reasons why someone doesn't appear in those records?
Well, the thing about that is that what we've got is the central registrar stuff. And remember, when a birth happens or a marriage or death, they get recorded at a district and then it is sent into head office. They didn't always make it to head office. So sometimes the district might have had the record, but the head office won't. Sometimes they just didn't get registered. I've got two of Alan's ancestors who didn't get registered at all, which was a bit tricky, frankly, to track down. And obviously they can be misspelled, and that happens a bit, that the registrar, because remember, it's a district person is writing it down, and then it heading into that office and someone's transcribed it because it's not obviously copied, it's copied by hand and then goes into head office and it's copied completely. We have got examples where you can't imagine why they copied it so badly. So those sort of things. We've actually got a book on all about the district registrations and all the issues about it. Beryl Shahinga, our research coordinator, has written a book on this, so it's worth reading that and finding out where the pitfalls might be and thinking where you've been looking is the central registration records or the district records, because it might be in one but not in the other.
And I think that book's available in our online store.
I think that book's available in our online store because it's a new edition, actually. Sorry about that, I forgot to sell it. There's a book, the book's available, but it is a complex area, but there are, you see that yourself when you find something, a mistake, and you can't imagine how it even got made, to be honest. And like I said, we did have someone come into the library a few weeks ago who was a grandmother, and she'd gone to get a passport update, and the new copy of her birth certificate said she was a boy, and she couldn't get a passport because she clearly wasn't a boy. And the only way she could prove to the registrar, who had it listed as a boy, I think her name was a bit gender neutral. Can you say that in these days? I don't want to be politically incorrect. A gender neutral kind of name was to actually find school admission records to prove she'd been enrolled as a girl, and all that time she'd been known as a girl. And it was really tricky, but you have no idea why anybody thought she was a boy, like from the register. And that was a mistake from the district record going into the centre.
All right, we've got a couple more questions from online that we can answer really quickly. Will the recording of this session be available? Yes, absolutely. I'm going to edit it this week, and it should be out within the week.
Yeah, and we'll have the answers to the questions and answers in it as well.
Yeah, this section will be in it as well. Also, a quick question asking if you can volunteer from home. You absolutely can. There's a lot of data checkers and stuff who work from home, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, because you realise we create our databases from original sources of some sort. They get scanned. For instance, the hospital records were all scanned from index cards that someone had written years ago. Then they were all scanned, and then you've got to check the scans and then make sure the information in the scan is right, and then that the information that goes from the scan into an index is right. So there's loads of checking work. Somebody's always doing. It's an army of checkers.
All right. Another question we have is asking if members who are outside SA can obtain copies of original BDM records. The answer is no, and nor can anyone in person either. No. We can provide transcriptions.
Yeah, I mean, if you were here, you could look at them on the microfiche, as I said, I did with the death certificate, a death record, but it didn't help me much. Couldn't read it, but you can get a transcription. So the answer is get a transcription. I'm sorry. You can go obviously to the registrar site and get a certificate, but it costs a lot more. And usually for family history, what you want is the information. You don't actually need a certificate to get a passport or something else. So I would recommend you use our cheap but good service and get a transcription.
a question, a little bit more information from someone in Queensland who would like to know more about BISA.
Okay, BISA was created to celebrate the bicentennial of the Foundation of South Australia, and it's the Biographical Index of South Australians, and society members were asked to contribute families. It took several years, and we produced 4 volumes, and then we produced a 2-volume later book as well, the green books. The BISA is for sale. You can buy the copies. They're in the office. Gemma's got them sitting behind her desk. It's really a massive work on South Australians. It's not complete, but it is pretty close to a fantastic resource of everybody who arrived in South Australia during the beginning of the parts of the 19th century. You mostly find your family in there, to be honest. Not everybody's there and not everyone's right, but they're there. Sometimes you can't work out why they put that name and that date, but it's a kind of a start.
Any updates on the Cornish database?
No, I haven't heard. Jan Loken, who's in charge of it, is in here almost weekly doing things, but I don't have any update. Do you know?
Work is being done, but we don't have any updates at the moment.
but we can make sure a newsletter goes out in the future saying where all these databases are at, which might help people and encourage more volunteering.
Request, someone who was murdered. Where can inquest results be searched? The death is reported in Trove, but the Gazette doesn't seem to have inquest results.
No, I think you probably have to go to state records to get inquest results, but I have to look at that chase that with Beryl. But often, the weird thing is, often if someone dies and it's an inquest, there isn't a death certificate either. So if you're looking for a death certificate and it's been an inquest, somebody, at some point in the bureaucracy, people forgot to write out the death certificate because they're holding an inquest and they think, obviously, that's a big official thing. The state records is where you get inquest or the Supreme Court. So, but we can definitely follow that up and find out where you go to get those.
Can I just add that there's a relatively new book out that is South Australian murders from 1833
oh, yes, there is too.
to 1838 to 50 years anyway. First 50
yes, there
years.
is.
And it has all of the deaths that they know of, all the murders that they know of.
That's fantastic.
So poor old Maria Daniel might be in there.
Well, I was going to.
Yeah. Fantastic. We have to look up.
We'll repeat that for the online. That there's a book with the first 50 years of murders in South Australia. So it's a great place if you want to look for that sort of information.
If you look up the library catalogue, you might be able to find the book on inquests and know what it's actually called.
I think we do have the book in our library.
I feel like we have.
Any more questions in the room? So just for the online people, just someone asking if there was a sort of an in-person library tour. The answer is yes. The last Tuesday of every month at 11 o'clock, drop in. Our friendly volunteers will do the tour and you will find out where things are physically in the space.
Yeah, we've just started it. We started it a
couple of months ago.
2 months ago. Our first one was in February. No, our first one was in February, the end of February. So it's like the last week of the month. And so we've had 2, and we'll be moved. So we would have just had one last week.
We did.
And so it's a walk around the library, and you can come. We are thinking of kind of expanding it so that we can have an online version. But if you look at Emily's video, which is on that handouts page at the very top, is a video that does help a bit too. So she's talking about what's in here in a general way. So that's worth looking at that video now. And then we've expanded it to have the library tour. And we're doing that for the next sort of 6 months to see how they go and what people ask and what, where it sits. And then we're working through what we'll do next to keep members informed about what they're looking at. I mean, for instance, we've already moved stuff to just where you're sitting. Sorry, everyone out there in, far north Queensland or outback New South Wales or whatever. We've moved the DNA collection so it's more accessible. And it's right just where you're sitting, for example. So we're gradually moving things around to make things more accessible and what there is. Now, we're always buying new stuff.
Just going to jump in quickly because someone's like, what is the handout page you keep referring to? Oh. That is on our website. Along the top bar, there's a section for resources. You drop it down to handouts, and that is where a wealth of information is, including the video that Helen mentioned, which is just a quick little, what do we have here at Genealogy SA? Now, I have a question about police gazettes. Can they be accessed online by means other than Ancestry?
We have the police gazettes in-house. I think if you were looking for a lookup, you could ask, and if you're a distant person, if you can come in, they're on the computers in the computer room, and you can look them up yourself. If you can't come in, you do get some hours, 2 hours, I think, a year of free research, and I would do a lookup. If that was me, I would ask a lookup and get the person someone in here to look it up for you. So I'm sorry, the answer is no, they're not available online except through Ancestry. You do realise Ancestry pay mega bucks to people to put these things online, but we have got them online here. You
can pop through a research request and we'll let you know.
Yeah, I don't think they're anywhere else really. I mean, for instance, parliamentary papers often appear in the databases of other records, and there are all sorts of license, there's all sorts of things in parliamentary papers. And we've got the full paper set, but they're not digitised, and there's no sign that the South Australian government are going to digitise them. So we do have some digitised bits of parliamentary papers, but basically you've got to go look at the parliamentary paper. They're mighty big books.
All right. So a question, when looking up records and you only put a surname, there is a reminder for other names, but if you don't know those names, how do you get that information?
I know, I did. Now, this is really funny. I had this conversation 2 weeks ago with our president about looking things up and saying, oh, did you always have to do that? And I've just put in surnames and got them. So I'm thinking it's a bit, I'm not quite sure how, you're not meant to, the reason for that is that we don't want people sort of scamming our whole databases. But I did just put in Rundle, for example, and I got the database. So I don't know that it's 100% true. I think if you put in a first initial, you can't just put in a letter. You've got to put in at least 2 letters. Yeah, I just put in surnames and got things. I agree. So quickly do it now before someone realises it's an error.
I think it also differs as to whether you're logged in or not. So if you're not logged in, make sure you're logged in.
Oh, that could be the answer, because you're right. That could be the answer, because I was definitely logged in and doing it. I'm thinking Robert was just telling me that you couldn't do this, but I'm doing it. That could well be it.
It's weird and technical.
Shh, don't tell
mostly.
Anyone. Keep it quiet. Keep it quiet.
A question from Dawn. Someone's a new member and starting on their family history journey. And they have a grandmother born in 1907 who was adopted. So how do you start with that kind of thing? Is this the kind of thing that is a research question?
Yes.
Yes, I think follow up with us on that one separately, Dawn, because it's a little bit big for the 5 minutes we've got left today. Let's just make sure.
I mean, in defence, this isn't really a how to do your family history. It's really good people are kind of into it and want to know more. We are running in July and November some introduction to family history seminars on a Sunday in July and a Sunday in November, dates to come and prices to come. And we're going to be running an introduction so that people can get it in-house. We haven't yet worked out how to do that sort of thing online, but we might well, over the next several months, we will start to work out how we could deliver that kind of information, that kind of workshop, I suppose it would be, online.
What else do I have? Will the BISA be updated online? I don't think we're currently correcting the previous volumes, but no, watch this space.
There are some there's some addenda to BISA. It's not what's in the database is not just the green books, and there are some addenda in it, but generally speaking, we're not correcting it. But I couldn't say that was going to be the case always. I mean, I'm slightly ideologically opposed to having Irish-born South Australians, German-born South Australians, Cornish-born South Australians. And I don't say, why can't we just put them all into the biographical index and just call it a giant biographical index? So I obviously haven't won that argument. However, I would think that over time we will be updating it or rethinking how it appears online. We can't really update it in a way because the people did contribute those records and that's what they think was right. Obviously now, because this was done in the 1980s, online information has grown massively. So you can find out things you couldn't possibly have dreamt of finding out in those days. So we'll see.
All right. Do we have any further questions from the room? No, we've flooded you with information today. Well, thank you so much for attending, both in person and online. We really appreciate you coming and we hope you've gotten something out of it. If you have anything you'd like to follow up, just flick me an email. You've got my email address. And otherwise, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.